My name is Jeff Henson. I've been here before, and I'm thankful for the opportunities Brad gives me to come and teach to you guys. And love your all's church, love the community here, love the spirit of this place, love the ministry of this place, and thankful to be here. And what we're going to do this morning, we're just going to kind of jump in, and we're going to be looking in the Gospel of John this morning. And John, he arranged his gospel around 7 miracles that Jesus performed, but he doesn't necessarily call them miracles, he calls them signs. And Jesus' miracles were not just like random acts of kindness, they were signs that pointed to who Jesus was. And these signs convinced John that Jesus indeed was the Son of God. And John is hoping that what he saw, what he experienced, will convince us as well. And in each of these signs, John has shown, as you go up to where we'll be today in John 11, in each of these signs, John has shown Jesus' power and authority over false gods, over religion, over nature, over the old covenant, over Satan's work. And in this 7th sign that we're going to be reading about this morning, Jesus shows power and authority over our greatest enemy, death. And through this text, Jesus also will point to our greatest hope, which is resurrection. This 7th sign is clearly Jesus' most dramatic sign in the Gospel of John. So go ahead and turn to John chapter 11. We're going to be starting in verse 1 if you want to follow along, and I think we're going to have the verses on the screen as well. Verse 1 says this: Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, the sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, what I love about this text is that you realize that Jesus didn't just have disciples. I mean, he had friends. And it's mentioned in this text is Mary, Martha, Lazarus, they were friends of Jesus. They were very, very close to Jesus. They don't even use Lazarus's name. They just call him the one that you love because they were so close. And Bethany, as is mentioned, is a small village less than 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. Jesus would often stay in Bethany when he traveled to Jerusalem, and many believe that Bethany was his home base when he was doing ministry near or around Jerusalem. Now, by the time that the messengers found Jesus, Lazarus had already died. But it tells us that Jesus says it will not end in death. And verse 5 says this in John 11. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days, and then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. Now, it's interesting to note that it says that he loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. It's very specific. It's noteworthy. They put it there. But whenever you hear that, you're like, he loves them. You kind of would expect that he loves them, so he drops everything that he is doing and everything that's going on and runs to Bethany, right? I mean, but it says he loves them, and then it says he stays there 2 more days. Now, it's one of those interesting texts for me because I'm like, that does not speak to serious urgency or serious intent, like what in the world is going on? And I think about, can you imagine Mary and Martha who sent this 911 to Jesus, and they probably expected him to come within the day, and then it's like crickets, silence. Like, where is our good friend Jesus? What is he doing? Did he not get the message, right? Does he not care? Jesus delayed for 2 days, and that had to feel like 2 years to them. Now let me ask you, how do you handle God's delay? When things don't happen like you desire or like you have planned, How do you handle when you feel stuck, waiting for God, maybe in a desperate place or a desperate season? How do you interpret those times when God's timing is seemingly late compared to your timeline? You know, I probably shared parts of all of my story with you guys over the years, but my very first ministry role job was right out of college. And within a year of being hired, the pastor who hired me resigned. And he had probably resigned about 9 months in. He hired me, big reason why I was going. He, founding pastor of the church. I mean, it was like, what in the world? Okay. And with some situations like that, not all, but some situations like that, there were plenty of opinions and thoughts and all sorts of stuff that went on when that pastor resigned. And so all of a sudden, there was some strife, some tension, some just craziness, like secret meetings, all sorts of just weird fun stuff, right? For me, no, not fun, just weird. And over the years, like if I were to count how many ministry colleagues that I had from that point that I said yes to that ministry to when I left, probably 20 to 30, ended up having three pastors in a 5.5 year period, had a few interim pastors in a 5.5 year period. I mean, let me just tell you that when I was in that season, me and Jesus had a lot of intense moments of fellowship, right? Because I'm praying hard, I'm seeking hard. I'm like, Lord, I'm ready to hit the ripcord and get out of here. I accepted every call of anybody anywhere in the world that was looking for a youth pastor at that time, because I'm like, this isn't where I'm supposed to be, right? This is hard. This is not fun. Get me out of here. But what I learned in those moments is I learned that there wasn't some grand spiritual conspiracy to make my life miserable and to hold God's goodness and grace from me. What I learned in those moments and seasons of delay is that my desires, my hopes, and my timetable are usually short-sighted, self-centered, and microwaved. Craving comfort, craving ease, craving instant outcomes, craving a faith that actually doesn't require faith, craving a faith that doesn't require trust or surrender. I really was craving this instant spiritual gratification. Maybe you can relate. But I also learned in that delay is that God was wanting to sanctify my desires. And it was in the waiting, in the delay, that God was wanting to strip me of my selfish and sinful motives and ways that plague my heart. It was in the delay that God was wanting to bring me to the end of myself, to be fully reliant on Him, yielding to His will and His timing. And here's the thing about Jesus waiting 2 days and that delay. You see, the delay creates dependency. The delay creates gratefulness. The delay creates desperation. The delay creates trust. The delay is the setup for God to show up and show off. It's the setup for God's will to be done in your life. And here's what's interesting. If you were to look at my timeline of my life, and you were to look at some of the most chaotic, stressful, maybe even very painful moments throughout my life, you would also see that those moments and those markers were also when God did the most transformational work within me. Some of the greatest inward impact happened in the delay, happened in the moments that I wanted out of instantly. Scripture says He loved them. And listen, He loves you and I as well. And I think it's important to note that and to remember that and to say it again and again and to be reminded of that is if you right now are in a time of waiting and delay, God has crazy, serious love for you, even though you may not feel it, even though you may not hear it, even though things are not evident yet. He loves you. You know, Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9 says this in the Message version. And this is the words of God. It says, I don't think the way you think. The way you work isn't the way I work, God's decree. For as the sky soars high above the earth, so the way I work surpasses the way you work, and the way I think is beyond the way you think. Good reminder, and I know we know that. His thoughts are higher, his ways are better. We only can see in part. Our perspective is clouded many times, imperfect, but God's is not. So Jesus stayed 2 days. Some of you are here in the delay today, and I just want you to hear these words as we move on. Delay is not denial from God. Delay is not final. Trust the process. Better yet, I would say, trust the person of Jesus. And we're about to see why, through this text, why you can trust him. Verse 17, John chapter 11 says this. If I can find it. Oh, there it is. It says, on his arrival, so Jesus gets there, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Lazarus being dead for 4 days is significant because there was a well-known Jewish belief that the soul of a dead person, if it remained in the vicinity of the body, hoping to re-enter it for up to 3 days, which is kind of crazy to think about. But that was kind of a belief and a superstition. But once decomposition set in, the soul departed. And so Jesus here was obviously aware of their burial customs and beliefs, and shows up on the fourth day to show and to make sure Lazarus is truly dead, and the miracle of Jesus cannot be construed as resuscitation or anything else for that matter. Verse 18 says this. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. And so you can imagine, because of the closeness, there was a lot of people that showed up for Mary and Martha in that moment. Verse 20 says, when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Verse 21, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. And those words of Martha are so honest, so raw, are they not? I mean, again, many times we read texts and stories and scriptures and kind of just scoot on past things, right? But that is such a real emotion and remark that comes out of Martha. She expresses what every one of us probably in this room have felt at some point, whether or not we verbalized it or not. And what we realize is in verse 32, which we'll read, Mary comes out, Martha's sister, and greets Jesus with the exact same greeting. If you had only been here. If you'd only been here, my brother wouldn't have died, is what she's saying. If you would have been here, I wouldn't have been feeling what I'm feeling with this pain and heartache. If you'd only been here, I wouldn't have to answer all these questions from my friends and people that came in that are saying, where's your Jesus? Where's this Messiah? I thought he could heal. Could he not save your brother? Have you ever felt that? Maybe you've felt, have you ever been there, Jesus? If you have been, then my marriage wouldn't have ended. My job wouldn't be gone. My finances wouldn't be a disaster. My relationships wouldn't be reeling. My family wouldn't be a mess. My health wouldn't be waning. My loved ones would still be here. Jesus, if you had only been here. You know, author Philip Yancey writes that when we find ourselves having those if you had only been there moments, that we're actually asking these 3 questions. God, are you there? God, do you care? And God, can you do anything about this? And I agree with him. And I think at the core of our questions and our pain, we're wondering if God is actually present in our pain. Has he abandoned us? Has he just left us to deal with all this stuff that we're going through and that we're feeling on our own? I think that when we look at Jesus in this passage, understanding that Jesus is fully God and fully man, understanding that God's heart is accurately and perfectly represented in Jesus' life, we can confidently conclude that Jesus is present in our pain. And I want to say this, pain encompasses many things. Pain encompasses many things. He is present in our lostness. He's present in our weariness. He's present in our heartache. He's present in our hopelessness. He's present in our anxiousness. He's present in our confusion. Jesus being present in our pain means Jesus doesn't exit stage right when we enter a painful season. He doesn't send us to voicemail or leave us on red, right? He doesn't run away. He runs to us. He enters into our pain if we'll let him. And it's interesting what Jesus didn't do in this exchange with Martha. He didn't walk away. He didn't ask one of the other disciples, handle this, right? He didn't chastise Martha for her words. He didn't shut her down. He was fully present with her in her moment of pain. And what I love about this is it tells us that Jesus can handle your words. Jesus can handle your despair. Jesus can handle your doubts, your questions, your heartache, your pain. Jesus can be and wants to be present where you are, whatever painful season you might be in. You know, I was talking with someone this past week about the text and this point. And they asked, how can we know that Jesus is present in our pain? How can we be confident of that, right? How can we know that that is true? What does that even look like? And one, great question and very relatable tension, I'm sure, for all of us, because we've walked through that probably, or maybe we are. And here's what I would say, first off, is we can look at Jesus' life through the scripture. I mean, he entered so many messy and complicated situations that were full of every emotion imaginable all the time. I mean, you look through the scriptures and I think of John 8 and the woman caught in adultery. Like, many of us, we'd see that, we're like, okay, I'm going to turn right? I mean, I'm getting out of this. He walks into it. I think of Mark chapter 5, a demon-possessed man who is known for screaming and cutting himself. Not really the place, and he's taking his disciples. It was like their first youth group trip. It was great. And but he goes there. He goes there. I think of the religious leader and the Jewish scholar Nicodemus in the middle of the night. I mean, listen, guys, I don't want my sleep interrupted ever for anything. If you call me, my phone's on silence. You're not getting me, right? And so, but no, Jesus in the middle of the night has this conversation. And it's a very complicated conversation. And it's one that has to happen in the cover of night for Nicodemus' safety and his reputation. But you can go throughout Scripture. I mean, the Gospels are just full. A blind beggar, right? The man that is at the pool of Bethesda who is lame. I mean, he is entering the most messy and complicated and painful situations any of us would ever enter and engage with in all of our lives, and he is doing it all the time. And so for me, I look at that and I see this consistent character of Jesus that is present in the midst of people's pain, heartache, and messes of their life. And the second thing I would say is this, is that I see Jesus move in other people. I see God's presence meet us through other people, even when we can't see it, feel it, even understand it in the moment. Our second child, Carter, who is 17 now, came into our world very unexpectedly. My wife was pregnant with Carter, and I remember getting a call while she was at school, and she goes, I think my water broke. Now, that would be a very normal possibility in pregnancy if it wasn't that she was at 26 weeks. And so at 26 weeks, and of course I'm like, you're lying, that didn't happen. Of course, that's my first response. But what's crazy is that Carter stayed in for another 2 weeks to 28 weeks, but still was born 12 weeks early. He was born 2.3 pounds, and actually dipped under 2 pounds in those first few days. He was in the NICU for 10 weeks. And I can tell you, even after we got him out of the NICU, it was on oxygen. There was a lot going on. So we almost probably rested better when he was in NICU than when he came home, because we're like, I don't know what to do here. We're gonna break him, right? But I look back at that time, and I would intellectually be able to say, yeah, Jesus was present in our pain. But down deep, I did not feel that. I didn't feel like I was experiencing that. It was a very dark, hard, and lonely season, quite honestly. A lot of questions, a lot of things going on in my head, my heart. For all of us, it was rough. But what's crazy through that is I experienced, and I think my wife would say the same, I saw God's presence in our pain through other people. People that showed up. Nurses who showed up. Strangers who showed up. And was I able to fully grasp that in the moment, in that season? Maybe not all the time. But as I look back in the rearview mirror, you see God's hand in so many ways, using people to express his goodness and to express his presence when we were in a season of uncertainty and heartache. Now, why do I share that? Because many times I think when we are in seasons where it's quiet, seasons where it's hard, seasons where it's dark, we're not confident of Jesus being in our pain, being present. We're not confident that he sees us. We're not confident that he cares. And what I would say to you is, in those moments, resort to something beyond your feelings. Resort to something beyond your own vision, and do your best in the moment to look for the hand of God's grace and God's goodness in a lot of different ways. I think back to this. This is one of those in the rearview mirror. I look back, and Carter, he was obviously born early, and we had to make a decision when he came early, is what were we going to do with him on our insurance. And Christina worked for a school, I worked for a church, and we decided, honestly, I don't even remember how we decided this, to be honest. It's just God's goodness and grace for us. We both put him on our policies. And he was definitely $1 million baby that I don't remember writing one check or paying one bill for the hospital for. And again, rear view mirror, you see Jesus present in the chaos, present in the complicated, painful season that we went through. King David in the Old Testament knew this as well. And he wrote this, Psalms 34:18. Many of you know this verse. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalms 23:4. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Psalms 139:7. Where can I go from the Spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? And what's interesting about the book of Psalms is that you have these powerful and clear declarations from King David about God's presence and closeness, but you also in Psalms have many prayers and words that question God's presence and closeness. And I love that because he honestly speaks to the complexity of faith and pain, the deep waters of faith and heartache, the roller coaster of emotions that regularly happen within all of us in this broken, messed up world. But throughout this book, we see that David, in the midst of his pain, in the midst of his struggle, in the midst of his distress, he knows that God is present. He knows that God is close, and we need to know that too. He is present in your pain. Even when you can't sense him, even when you can't feel him, even when you can't see him at work in or around you, even when you can't see the finish line, maybe you can't even see the light at the end of the tunnel, maybe you can't even see the next step in your faith journey, be assured and confident that Jesus is present. Now let's keep going. Verse 32, John 11. It says this: when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, we talked about that, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Here's a verse we can all memorize this morning, John 11:35. It's 2 words. We can all walk out of here and say, I memorized scripture today, right? It's Jesus wept. Verse 36, and the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Those verses are for me, some of the most powerful verses in the Gospel of John. They profoundly communicate the humanity of Christ and the heart of Jesus. Jesus did not impede this family's grieving. Instead, by joining with them, he gives gracious permission and shows unbelievable compassion. Verse 33 said that he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. The word troubled, when strictly translated, means really angry, irate. So as Jesus encounters the deep sorrows of death and human pain, it made him mad. He had a holy anger. He's staring down the consequences of the fall of man. He's staring down the final enemy named death. He's staring down the wreckage that sin and death has caused those he loves, and he was moved deeply by it. So not only is Jesus present in our pain, Jesus is moved by our pain. You know, in this passage, we see Jesus, the incarnate Son of God, the eternal Word of God, shed tears. This reminds me of Paul's words in Romans 12:15, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. And Jesus is doing that very thing. He is weeping with those who are weeping. And on the verge of Jesus' greatest miracle, Jesus' last sign, he was overwhelmed by the feelings of grief and loss, and he wept uncontrollably with them. And I want you to hear this morning. And again, this is one of those things that intellectually, and I would say even theologically, sometimes we get jammed up and it's hard for us to grasp and embrace, but I believe that Jesus weeps with you as well. I believe that he is stirred and moved by the pain that you're experiencing, the pain that you have experienced. I can't fully fathom and articulate what that looks like and what that means, but I believe it wholeheartedly. I believe he weeps when we weep. He hurts when we hurt. He is able to sympathize with our pain and weaknesses. In this text in John 11, it really helps us understand more accurately what the writer of Hebrews wrote in Hebrews 4:15 and 16 when he wrote, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. But we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. We do not have a high priest that does not get it, does not get what we're going through, does not get what we're feeling, does not get what we're facing and the tensions and complexities of faith and life. He gets it. God is not a God of indifference. God is not a God that is unaffected by our loss. God is not a God that doesn't care or isn't involved in the entirety of our lives. God is not a God who just sits in heaven waiting to write spiritual traffic tickets when we mess up or do something wrong. God is a God who loves, who cares, who forgives, who directs, who heals, who speaks, and yes, weeps. You're not weeping alone today. You're not hurting alone today. You are not alone. Jesus is present in your pain, and Jesus is moved by your pain. Verse 38, John 11 says this. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. He's at the tomb of Lazarus. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. I love Martha's warning to Jesus, right? She's like, this is not a good idea. This is very smelly. It smells like death. And I mean, and really beyond just the smell, this is what she's saying down deep, truly, is Jesus, you're too late. The situation's too bad. I mean, he's dead. It's too far gone. And I love this because what Jesus is about to do, he's about to give a picture of resurrection that I'm sure they never forgot. They never forgot, and we should not either. Verse 41 says this, so they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. Verse 43, when he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Verse 45, therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. Jesus is giving them and us a powerful and profound picture of resurrection power. The same power that will be fully displayed after Jesus is crucified and rises out of the grave. The same power that Jesus offers to you and offers to me this morning through his life, death, and resurrection. Resurrection power for eternity, which I think many of us, it's easy for us to grasp, but also for today. So in this moment with Lazarus, Jesus is foreshadowing his own death and resurrection, but he's also giving us a snapshot of what he is capable of, even in the midst of pain, even in the midst of situations and moments that we believe are too far gone, that are beyond his reach, that are outside of his scope. Jesus is present in our pain. Jesus is moved by our pain, and Jesus is hope in our pain. When I was doing ministry in Las Vegas, I had a friend from back home. I got a call, and he had been in an affair for over a year, and it all blew up. He was caught. The affair was found out. And I'll never forget the first conversation I had with him in person. Because honestly, as I came into that conversation, I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't know where he would be. You just don't know. You overthink things, all those things. And when I went to that conversation, if I were to put a descriptive word on our interaction, I guess you could say, would be angry. I remember he was angry. He was angry at his wife. He was angry at his job. He was angry at everything. And to be quite honest, him being angry made me angry. So I kind of responded that same way, right? Because I was pressing in, calling him out, a lot of just intense moments. And I remember after we talked, and I'm sure we had our exchange and then probably watched sports or something and acted like nothing happened, right? That's kind of what we do as guys. But I remember walking away from that conversation going, there's absolutely no way they'll stay together. Absolutely no way. He's far too gone. I'm sure she's far too gone. I wouldn't want to welcome that angry guy in my house. No. But that's kind of where my head was. And it was one of those where it's like, only God can do this. Only God, right? But I could say that, but honestly, I'm not sure I believed it walking away from that exchange. And throughout the next 12 to 18 months after that, God began to work miraculously in his life, in his marriage. They started going to counseling separately, then together. A lot of heart work, a lot of hard work that they did. And slowly but surely, pieces of their life began to be healed and restored. And today, you're not going to find a perfect couple today. But what you will find is a couple that loves each other, a couple that's still fighting for their marriage, a couple that is showing compassion to one another, and a couple, honestly, that is an example of Christ's resurrection power in their life. I mean, there was no way, too far gone, right? But only God, and God did. And why is this relevant? What does this have to do with a dead man walking out of a tomb, right? because that marriage was dead. That marriage was lifeless. That marriage was too far gone. But Jesus showed up and brought that marriage back to life. Now, here's the deal, why this is relevant to you is many of you in this room have things in your life, maybe situations, maybe people, maybe just even past experiences that have brought you to a place where you're like, there is no hope. It's too far gone. It's out of reach. You know, that ship has sailed. There's no way God can get to me. There's no way God can use me. There's no way God can heal me. There's no way God can move in this or through this. There is no way. It's an only God situation, right? And what I love about this is if Jesus can raise a dead man who has been dead for 4 days out of a tomb, he can resurrect dead things in your life. He can bring things back to life. He can bring hope. He can bring hope in places that are hopeless. He can bring life in places that have been dead. He can bring fulfillment and purpose and passion to areas of your life that haven't seen those things in decades. He can bring it back. Only God. If he can bring a man who's been dead for 4 days, he can do some miraculous work in your life as well. Jesus is hope in our pain. I think what he has shown through Lazarus, and then what he goes and shows on by going to the depths of hell for us to defeat death, to defeat sin, is that nothing is impossible for him. Nothing. And I think our tension, guys, is for us not to just believe that here, but believe that here. Is that he can. He can. I love a text that I think it's in Luke. It's where someone comes to him and is like, Lord, if you can, right? And Jesus is like, if you can, what are you talking about? And then the guy's like, please heal me from my unbelief, right? Because Jesus can, and he will. It may not be on your timing. It may not look the way you want it to look. The outcome may be differently than you envision. But listen, if you invite him into your painful season, your heartache, your stressful season, your uncertain season, whatever that mess and confusion and lack of clarity looks like for you, he will show up. And he will bring life, and he will bring passion, and he will bring vision, and he will bring resurrection power to you. He said this, and we jumped over this. Some of you are like, Jeff, what are you jumping over the biggest part of this chapter? You know who you are. There's a few of you. You're like, what's he doing going over this verse? John 11, 25 and 26, he makes this declaration, and it's a great reminder for us to end on. It says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And he says this to Martha, but listen, he's saying it to us this morning. Do you believe this? Let me ask you this morning, what in your life needs resurrection power? What in your life do you think is too far gone, beyond God's reach? Who in your life do you think is too far gone? What in your life do you think is too late for Jesus to do anything about? Do you believe? I love that question because it's an invitation to life, right? It's an invitation to new beginnings, to eternal opportunities, and in some cases, eternal life for some of us here. I mean, it's an invitation to walk and move with Jesus. It's an invitation to respond to Jesus. Belief means to fully place your trust in the person of Jesus. His life, his death, his resurrection, to stand in the promises of God's truth and the perfect life and work of Jesus that happened on the cross and was displayed, his power displayed through the resurrection. And so some of you this morning have placed your trust in a lot of things, but not Jesus. You've sought salvation, purpose, identity, and life through a variety of things that have not delivered and will not ever deliver for you. For some of you, this invitation is to place your trust in Jesus for salvation today. Some of you have never done that. You don't have that confidence and assurance, not only of eternity, but of that hope that we can have on earth as well. For some of you here this morning, to believe means for you to actually give Jesus those dead things. Like really. Not like, yeah, like really. Give him those dead things, those dead situations, those hopeless circumstances. It's time to surrender those and put them in his hands and remove them from yours. Listen, Jesus called out Lazarus' name, and this morning he is calling out yours. He calls it out. He knows all of us. He knows exactly where we're at. He knows exactly what's going on. And he is whispering your name this morning, asking you, will you respond to the invitation of life that I am giving you?